Welcome back to the Aussie Shed, ladies and gentlemen, for episode 5 of Project Fairlady. Last episode of the project, we did a little bit of rust repair and we shaved the back end of the Fairlady. Something a bit different today, folks. More on the mechanical stuff. So, bits been going on since you were last here. Things to note that you can probably see, a little bit more cleaning up has happened around the headlight areas. And you can see none of that junk's in the middle anymore. We've gotten rid of this pile of crap, eh? Who'd make that? What a piece of garbage. And where's that going to go? In the bin. Sorry folks, couldn't help myself. I've also removed the aftermarket oil cooler that was positioned there and all the plumbing and the associated thermostatic sandwich plate. It's all gone. I've actually removed the factory oil cooler as well and just routed the plumbing for that back into itself. I've taken the AC fan off the front. Just so that I can get in here and clean all this stuff up and just suss out what's working and what isn't, and you know what's leaking, which is pretty much everything, and what's not, which is almost nothing. So you can see I've got rid of the valving and all the associated hardware there for the high-cast system. I'm still temporarily running the original high-cast pump just for now, and all I've done is I've just diverted the line which runs from the front stage, I think it is, or the rear stage of the pump, back into the reservoir there. You can buy a kit which is just a block that joins two of the banjo fittings together and then basically achieves the same thing, or you can just cut off one of the lines, flare the end of it, and then just return it back into the pump there, because one of the pieces that you're joining from is actually the piece that comes off here and then goes across. So you join that onto another piece that comes up from underneath, but you can basically just cut that off, which is this one here, flare the end of it, and then join it back into the pump and remove the one that forms the other half of this block that you put together. I've really only done that as a temporary measure, just so that I can keep the engine running and do more checks on the sort of system and everything while it's still in one piece. I've also removed all the high-cast lines from under the car. I've taken them out all the way and right through the back and taken them out in the rear differential area and everything. That was a giant pain in the ass because of all the fuel line work that's been done on the car at the back. Basically, these guys come from the school of no, we won't tie anything up properly or make any brackets. We'll just wrap everything around something else. So what they'd done is they'd wrapped all the fuel lines around all the high-cast lines, which made it absolutely a giant pain in the ass to get all the high-cast stuff out. You notice the radiator fan shroud's off. I will go in a bit closer, folks. I'll just go hands-free and grab a torch, folks. Hang on, I'll take the camera off the mount. Alrighty, so you can see the radiator fan shroud and everything's off. I did that so I'd have access to everything that's sort of going on, so I can see stuff. You can see it's got a pretty nice PWR radiator in there. I've ordered a new fan for it. I'm getting one of the GK Tech fans for it, because you can see this fan has some really wicked cracks in it. Like, look at that. That is a really big crack. And they're all through it. Like, it's got some really big cracks. These things are known for exploding when they get really, really cracked up. So have a look at your fan, folks. If it's old and really cracked up, just watch it, because one day you'll be accelerating in your car and it may let go and just friggin' go through your radiator hoses and your intercooler pipes and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, the GK Tech fan is supposed to be more efficient than the standard fan is. So yeah, I've ordered one, along with a whole heap of other GK Tech hardware, suspension related, for the car. You can see there's a fuel pressure regulator mounted there just after the filter. I've got that so I can test the fuel pressure in the system with the setup the way it is at the moment. And the reason is, folks, I'm about to start removing the fuel system that's on the car now that came with it. You know, the external surge tank and the external Bosch fuel pump. And I want to return it back to original configuration, just because it's quite a butchered mess. And I really need to get it back to something that I can work with, because the system that I'm going to be running the engine with is obviously going to be a more modern system, which is just a large in-tank pump and you know, an external fuel pressure regulator, you know, the basic sort of stuff. Like, what's on there works, but it's quite old-fashioned, and I don't think the Bosch 044 is really up to the task. Generally they flow about as much as a Warbro 255, which is probably close to the limit if I really turn the boost up on the engine, which is what I plan to do. So yeah, I want to check the fuel pressure, see what it's tuned with, because obviously the engine's, you know, it's tuned at a certain fuel pressure. And I just want to make sure that the stock in-tank pump can keep that fuel pressure just at idle, so I can keep the car running to sort of drive it in and out and do more testing and more frigging around on the vehicle, but have the thing kind of running, you know. I've also dropped the oil out of it, folks. The oil wasn't too bad, a little bit dirty. I'd say it's probably been in there for, I don't know, maybe 5,000 or 6,000 Ks, maybe a bit more. Just so that I know it's got clean oil and a clean filter in it while it sits here in the workshop. You know, I don't know how long it's going to be before the motor comes out. I obviously want to keep the thing in reasonably good condition. Oil can get a bit sort of, you know, a bit corrosive if it's got too much in the way of combustion deposits in it, if it's left over time. So at least I know if it's got fresh oil and fresh filter on it, it's going to be right for a while. With just short fire ups and, you know, a bit of moving the car in and out and all that sort of thing, it won't be too detrimental to it. You can see I've got the filter sitting there on the bench. I'm about to cut that open and have a look inside it, using my handy dandy oil filter cutter that I made a couple of months ago. It's on one of my videos. I'll leave a link to it up in the corner right now. So we'll get this cut open and we'll have a bit of a look at it. So this is what she looks like all pulled apart, folks. The oil filter cutter down there. Not bad, these Ryco filters. They're always a quality sort of a unit. So what we're looking for is any signs of debris inside this filter element. So basically we just start opening it up and looking around. Not sure if you can see, but there's a tiny little bit of metal in there. Nothing to be worried about though at this stage. It's just sort of a general consensus that we're looking for. There's some very fine bits of metal in there so far. Nothing particularly that would be concerning. Once again, the whole idea of the filter is to catch any of this sort of stuff. You'll always see little bits and pieces because your engine does wear, but hopefully nothing too big. It's pretty clean so far. What you're looking for is an overall trend. Like if you see a lot of metal pasty sort of stuff, you know, and just anything that looks a bit out of the ordinary, you know. But bits and pieces, a lot of it's not even really metal, like bits of sealer and stuff, little tiny fragments of stuff. Just sort of nothing really. A few little specks, but nothing to be concerned about so far anyway. Yeah, nothing too concerning, folks. I'm led to believe this engine's still fairly fresh as far as the amount of Ks that are on it. Some, you know, fine, sort of tiny metal specks isn't out of the ordinary. But I'm pretty happy with that. Obviously, I'll keep monitoring it, and that's what you do. So you can see the benefit of doing this, folks. You're not always going to find stuff in your oil when you do an oil change, because the purpose of the filter is to filter out all this kind of stuff. So at least looking at the filter itself, you can really keep a close eye on everything. So anyone who's serious about their engines, you need an oil filter cutter. As I say, if you want to see how to make one, have a look at my video. Alright, I'm happy with that. That can go in the bin. Next. There we go, folks, quick little tidbit for you. I'm just setting up to repower the car up. I've had the battery disconnected in the back because of all the various things I've been doing. Plus I'm really not confident leaving the battery hooked up to this thing of a night time in the shed. in case there's a short somewhere in it, you know, because the whole electrical system is a bit dodgy on the thing. And for good reason, folks. Let me just show you something quickly. As I say, I put the battery back in the boot and just went to power the car up so I can check fuel pressure and stuff like that before I go tearing this fuel system apart. And I hit the key, starter motor clicked for a second, and then it went completely dead. And I'm just like, what the F? And considering I had it on the battery charger a couple of days ago to make sure it had a full battery for this, I'm just like, oh, what's going on? So I've just been working my way around with a multimeter. And lo and behold, I found something. Now, remember guys, the quality of the work with this battery conversion and all the other bits and pieces that this particular workshop did. Let's go and have a look. So I started checking in here with the multimeter. This is the post that they've used to bring the battery cable from the back through into the engine bay to the starter motor. And it's completely dead, and I've got the battery hooked up and there's power at the back, and I've redone the earth connections and things like that, thinking, oh, you know, what is it? But I've wiggled this, right, and watch this. Here we go. You can just, oh, look at that. They haven't fucking properly crimped it. Eh? Just typical, isn't it? Fucking typical. Now, that's disconnected, folks, at the back. So you can imagine, you have this thing sitting in your shed of a night time and this thing just fucking drops out. Main battery cable, earth's on the body shell of the car goes up in flames, workshop goes up in flames. You can never be too careful, folks. Let's just cut the heat shrink off this thing and see what we've got. See if they've made any attempt to crimp it or if they've just forgot. Sort of crimped. Bugger me, folks. People are such beep. I don't know. I give up. I freaking give up. Alright, folks, I'll fix this up and I'll turn it back on and we'll start delving into this fuel system. Alright folks, she's back together now. I've crimped a new terminal on the end there. There's the old one. Part of the problem was it's the wrong size for a start for the cable. It's too big, and the cable only went into it by about 5mm before it was crimped by the look of the markings on the end of the cable. Obviously wasn't checked by anyone. Can't understand why the hell not, unless maybe the owner asked for the leave me stranded special, which I'd say he was going to get at some point. Righto. Let's see if this thing will fire up. So keep an eye on the fuel pressure for me, folks, and yell out if it's alright. Is it alright? Can you see the fuel pressure? No worries. Alright, as it sits, it's looking about 58, 60 psi thereabouts. So I'll go and disconnect this Bosch pump. We'll go underneath. I'll take this underneath. We'll have a bit of a look at all the lines and all that sort of crap. And we'll revert back to the in-tank pump. And we'll just see if the in-tank pump can deliver us the same 60 psi at idle. You can hear quite a bit of noise rattling from the engine there. I'm pretty sure it's got really bad lifter knock on this bank here. I don't know, I've got to get the engine out and start looking into it. Oil pressure and everything's still good, so I don't think it's anything too major, but mate, you just don't know, do you? So anyway, at this stage we'll just sort this fuel system stuff out for the time being. And of course, folks, eventually, you know, we're heading for engine out and everything like that, and then engine tear down and everything. So let's go under the back and have a bit of a look, eh? Right folks, so here we are under the back of the car. This is what we're dealing with here. We've got our swirl pot surge tank thingamabobby up there, I guess you could call it that. There's a 044 pump, and then we've got all the lines to contend with. We've got 4 lines. We've got 3 lines here that run to and from the tank, and then we've also got the feed line here out of the pump, which obviously runs all the way up to the motors. I'm sure what we have here in no particular order is, as I say, we've got feed to the motor, return to the surge tank, which is return from the motor. Then we've got feed to the surge tank from the original fuel pump, and we have return from the surge tank back to the fuel tank. I think that's right. Anyway, so what we've got to do now, folks, is we've got to start draining this mess. So I think I'll undo this fitting here on the back of the fuel pump, and we will drain the surge tank, and also I assume the line back to the pump from the motor will probably drain back here as well. As long as I've got something that holds a couple of litres and I don't go smoking a cigarette or anything, I think I should be pretty right. Right, folks, that's that mess pretty much sorted out now. You know, all the crap's gone. We're ready to sort of revert back to the tank, so I'll just run you through what we've got here. What you have here is feed and return to the engine. And what you have here also is feed and return to the tank. Basically, that surge tank and pump arrangement was just kind of spliced into the middle of it. So what we'll do now is we'll get up top. These two lines here will be coming out of the fuel hanger, you know, that'll be your feed and return. So basically we'll just remove these and then rejoin these two back in, and we should be good to go, other than working out what they've done sort of underneath, because I'd say these go into a cut hard line, which is why there's these cut hard lines up sort of under here. So we'll have a look at that. I'd say we'll probably be able to just work with what we've got there for the time being, because as I say, I'm probably going to get a new fuel hanger anyway, and we'll just see if we can get this working. Part of the reason is I wanted all this stuff gone, and you know, all these bolts out of here, so I can repair this spare tyre well in the boot and fill the holes where the surge tank was mounted on and all that sort of stuff. And also I'm getting pretty close to dropping the whole rear axle assembly, you know. And without all that crap out of the way, it just makes it that little bit harder and that little bit more of a pain in the ass. And, you know, sort of knowing where you are with everything. The more I remove on this thing, the more I know where I am with stuff, and the more I know how to deal with everything, instead of it being stuff that's just been done by someone, compared to factory stuff, which is pretty easy to get your head around. The only electrical that we've had to deal with, folks, is the power of the pump, which is that red wire that goes all the way to the engine bay. I'll get the car down, I'll disconnect that, I'll actually take the whole relay and everything out. That is the relay that's floating in the engine bay. There's a relay that you may have seen just before that's just kind of floating in the middle of nowhere. That's the relay for the fuel pump, of course. So we'll take that all the way back to where it gets its trigger from, which is in the fuse box, and just disconnect it and pull it down, and we'll be working back up in this area here. We'll take the covers off the fuel tank so we can get into the sender area and stuff, and we'll have a look at these lines. So just quickly, folks, before we go looking at the fuel tank plumbing and reconnecting it up to our standard in-tank pump, I just thought I'd show you guys what I've come across. It's kind of noteworthy just for how shithouse it is, and this is the sort of thing that you'll find on old cars. So this is the relay that ran that fuel pump in the engine bay here, just swinging in the middle of nowhere, nothing holding it up. It's got a cable tie sort of here, and the rest of it was just kind of bent up and wrapped around stuff, you know. This is the cable here that I've pulled up from out the back. It's sort of quite a long one, just straight on the floor there. I pulled that up from under here. It just followed the fuel lines up, so at least it had a little bit of protection from the heat from where the turbo is on this side. But you can see the wiring standard is just absolutely garbage. You've got this black wire here is the trigger wire. And of course it's a black wire because everyone knows that you use black wires for all your positives. And you can see it's got a joint in it here about, you know, 2 inches before it terminates on the relay there. and it just goes back into the relay box on the front here where it's got power. I'd say there's one of these relays is ignition power. I'd say it's off that, probably one of these green ones, not sure yet. Haven't really looked into it, but that's it there. You can see it runs under there and into that box. But just, you know, the lack of fucking knowledge on the part of whoever did this, obviously not an auto electrician or any resemblance of an auto electrician that's done the work, because it's just so terrible. This is your supply. This black is, again, a black wire here used for your positive. Now that's just the biggest no-no in car stuff. You use all sorts of coloured wires for all sorts of things, okay, but black wire is only used for negative wires, unless you're wiring something like an alarm system in, where you're trying to hide the function of the wires by you know, making everything the one colour kind of thing. So typically here you've got, this is your supply for your relay. So this wire here switches the power to the relay, so that turns on when you turn your ignition. This flicks the relay, which sends power down this wire to the fuel pump. This thin black wire here, that's the earth from the switch, and allows the switch to function, and then it allows power to pass between these 2 points. So ignition goes on, earth to here, switches the switch, power goes through from this to this, which then runs to the fuel pump. So of course they couldn't use a bit of this red wire on the power side of this. Like you can see, it goes straight up onto this battery post that they've mounted on the firewall there, but it's a friggin' black wire. Like, talk about deceiving and creating problems for people troubleshooting stuff and working out just what the fuck things are. And here, look, there's another wire here just floating in the engine bay. It's a black wire again, so we don't know whether it's positive or negative. We don't know nothing about it, but it's just floating in the engine bay. So I've got no idea what works, what doesn't work, where it comes from, what it's meant to be for. But this is just the sort of typical shit that you find. What pisses me off? Put together half-arsely by some... I've got to control myself, folks. I'm going to get banned from YouTube. This car just wants me to swear so much. Anyway, very frustrating finding crap like this, because I'm in a situation where I can deal with it and I know what's done with all this kind of crap. But the problem is that the general public and young people own these cars a lot of the time, and they don't have the experience to work around this sort of shit. Like, you see this and just go, what the fuck? Oh yeah, black wire, that's negative. And it's like, no, black wire's fucking positive. Well, what about this black wire? Well, is that positive too? No, that black wire's negative. Well, what about this black wire here? So that's negative as well. No, that's positive. That's from a switch. Okay, so this red wire, is that positive or negative? Oh, well, that's positive. Right, okay. Nothing like a bit of consistency. Anyway, folks, the whole lot's just going to get ripped out and tossed in the bin. I might be able to salvage some of this red wire. It's a decent length by the look of it. I'll use it for something or other. But, mate, I just thought I'd show you that. It's just the typical shit you find. It's just super, super frustrating when I'm pretty sure someone's paid money for this to be done, you know. This has been done in a workshop, because the original build of this car, which would have included the fuel pump setup and everything, was done by a workshop, and that is, I'm sure it would have been their work, which really concerns me about other stuff on the car now. Anyway, I think I'll go and have a beer. I'll be back shortly with the fuel pump plumbing, folks. Alright folks, I'm over the top of the fuel tank here. I've got the cover taken off to expose the hanger and the connections and everything. And it's pretty much as I thought. You can see these two rubber hoses that are sitting here. They're the original pipes that were connected in. These just have a small tail on them, then they connect into the hard lines just under here. They're pretty hard to get to without dropping the tank. They're a little bit knocked around too. You can see there's quite a few, you probably can't see, but they've got a few nicks in them and things like that. And plus the hard lines that these connect into that run down under the car there, we can see that they've been cut off. So what I think is the best bet to do is to use these existing hoses here that they've put on, which actually went to the surge tank, and reconnect those underneath into the hard lines that feed the car. I'm pretty sure there was enough length on them to be able to do that, so that's what I might do, folks. Instead of reconnecting these two up, because they're probably full of crap as well, and then hooking them back up underneath as well, which we would have to then deal with the cut off hard lines. I think I'll just use these two hoses, as I say, and hook them in at the bottom if they reach, which I'm pretty sure that they will, and then I'll deal with this whole mess later. The fuel pump hanger's got to come out anyway, whether we replace it with an aftermarket unit or modify this one. I'll see how I feel when the time comes and what the requirements are of what we're going to end up with. But for the time being, I think it's just too much of a pain to deal with all this mess here, and plus it's very hard to get to this. You can actually see along here, they've mangled the edge of the surround here to be able to do this. I think they've been probably dicking around. It looks like this has been bent up with pliers, and they've got their pipes in, and then they've kind of, I don't know, attempted to sort of straighten it back out, but it's still pretty crap looking. But you can see someone's definitely been at it around there, and it's no coincidence that it's in the same area where they've been dicking around with the fuel pipes here. So I'll hook these up, folks, and I'll see if we've got fuel pressure and if we can restart the car. Alright guys, he's all hooked back up. I've primed the key a few times and we have fuel pressure on the gauge there. So what I'll do, I'll give her a quick kick in the guts, make sure we're maintaining fuel pressure while it's idling, which I'm sure it will. If it's got pressure now, everything seems to be fine. And make a note of what it is, and if everything's good, just put that behind us for the time being with a build. Now that we've got all that area cleared up, we can look at other things. Alright, I'll go and kick her in the guts. So fuel pressure's about 50 psi, folks. So it's about, 6 or 8 psi lower than it was before with the other pump. But that's alright, that'll do us for idle. Obviously the other pump had a little bit more behind it, so it was able to maintain a higher pressure. That'll certainly do us for now. So I'll go and turn her off. Right folks, that's all good. Everything seems to be working as I would expect it to be. As you saw, fuel pressure's a little bit lower than it was with the other pump setup. We're looking at 50 compared to about 58, which is absolutely fine for idle at the moment, because really that's all it's going to be doing. So overall, a positive outcome. We've successfully performed a crapendectomy. All the crap's been removed. And now we can go back to focusing on other things, on the beautiful Z32 Fairlady. So I think we'll leave this video here, folks. We'll go down a whole new path with next week's video. We'll tear into something else. But for now, thanks for stopping by the Aussie Shed, folks. Always a bloody pleasure to have you here. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. Remember to subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment. And I'll bloody well see yous on the next one. Cheers.